Now, I hear different speculations about this before Salvatore was killed and before his downfall. Is that when he owned like businesses in Atlantic City, and then one of those businesses was sold to Donald Trump. Is that true, or
They had
because
a
I hear like different
they had a
articles?
piece of real estate. Um, it was Salvie and I think one of the Narducci boys. They had it was a corner. It was I want to say it was called the Bistro. I forget. It was on a corner, Pacific and Missouri, I think. It was a key piece of property that Trump needed to complete the block where he was building his casino and his parking garage. I think it was the block where the parking garage was. And so they sold it. They bought it for X and sold it for Y. It made a lot of money on the deal. And people point to that and they say, look, Trump is in with the mob. Look at this deal. Everybody down there was getting ripped off. It was a big monopoly game. And while there's a lot of reasons to believe Trump had nefarious connections, I don't think that particular deal was one of them. I mean,
But
everybody in Atlantic City was playing monopoly back then, and Testa and Narducci were shrewd. They had a valuable piece of property, and they made a lot of money on the deal.
who was getting ripped off? Was it Trump or the mafia members? Because some say that one made better than the other, and I get confused to who was the one that won the fair game in the finance world.
In that particular financial deal,
Hmm.
well, I mean, I think that's what the market was. You know, everybody, land speculation was rampant down there. I did a whole big series about that. It was everybody was playing monopoly, and if you had the right piece of property in the right block, you could hold out for as much money as you wanted, and you would probably get it because those casinos were in a rush to get built and get open. Uh, Financial reality disappeared. So to say that one case is an example of Trump and the mob, I think is a bit of a stretch.
Oh, I'm
It's
not saying that either because also when it came to the union members, you had no choice but to do business with the mob. It's not like you
right.
like like there was like holding picket signs to say where the mob buy from us. It's like that was just like indirectly that's how the service was.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's funny because I've talked about this before, and it's somewhat ironic. I mean, Trump would say, he's being tarred with a broad strokes of a brush by saying he was mob connected because he bought that piece of land from two mobsters when everybody down there was doing it. And the irony is, it would be kind of like somebody would stand up and say, all Mexican immigrants are drug dealers, all Muslims are terrorists. Who would say that? You know, I mean, that's Trump's a master at that kind of crap, turning things around on people. But yeah, I mean, he had a lot of crazy connections. Probably make a better case in New York than Atlantic City in terms of his dealings with the mob. But that particular case involving that particular piece of real estate, the mob guys made a killing. But a lot of guys were making a killing in real estate, and I don't think you can read too much more into it than that.
Gotcha. And then Frank Chicky Narducci, before he was killed, wasn't he supposed to go to possibly might get indicted for those RICO charges?
I think a lot of them were, yeah. I mean, I think there was a big RICO case coming down, and Narducci would have been in that case, but he was killed. Yeah, I mean, that's there was. Bruno would have probably been in the case too, but he was killed and tested. The first big RICO case turned out to be not so big because the guys that were going to be targeted ended up
True.
dead.
What about Rocco Marinucci? Because I never heard too much about him other than him being the person that hit the detonator. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, that's always been the speculation that he was the guy who was in the van across the street, pushed the button, and the reason people think that is, well, one, a lot of underworld sources were saying that, but two was, I think a year later he's found with a firecracker stuffed in his mouth,
Mhm.
killed. I mean, that was Salvie Testa taking revenge on what happened to his father. So yeah, I mean, I mean, you think about that. I mean, the stuff that was going on back then um, was the stuff of movies and novels. I mean,
I know.
you couldn't make it up
No
any
one ever
better.
made a movie about that.
Yeah, you couldn't make it up any better. That kind of stuff. And Marinucci blows up Phil Testa, and then a year later he's killed and there's firecrackers stuffed in
The
his mouth.
same
Now,
day.
what does that say? Phil Testa is killed on the Ides of March. I mean, this was so much symbolism,
March Madness for the
crazy,
mob, their birthdays and the
yeah,
days that some of
so
them
much craziness back then, and it was a fascinating era. And as I said earlier, I was fortunate to be working for a newspaper that had a lot of resources, and they just said, go cover it, go do what you got to do. And
Now, speaking of like the Scarborough era and all the violence thing that he's like associated with, his nephew Philip Leonetti, who still does interviews even with Value Entertainment, who still keeps himself discreet. Have you got a chance to actually see him since you've been in the same documentaries as him before?
I've talked to Phil a couple of times. And in fact, at one point, he and I were talking about doing a book, but it didn't work out. He subsequently did a book with someone else. Um, Phil Leonetti was a very intelligent guy and a very, very good witness, probably one of the best witnesses. And I
And
think I know a little bit about where he is now, and he's also one of the few guys to turn his life around. He's got a legitimate business. If people who are his associates now have no idea who he was. I mean, he's been able to make that transition. A lot of guys can't do that. A lot of guys like Nick Caramandi, a guy I know very well and wrote about. Nick has never been able to adjust to life after the mob.
is he still alive or?
He's alive. He's living in Middle America. That's all. I mean, he's living in a trailer park. I mean, if he could turn it around and go back to where he was as a wise guy, he'd do it in a minute. That was the high point of his life. But so yeah, he's an example of somebody who wasn't able to make it. Whereas Leonetti was smart, intelligent. It didn't hurt. Supposedly, Leonetti and his mother made off with a couple $1,000,000 when they flipped.
Really? And I was just not too far at the Atlantic Cemetery that I've actually did some research about the Yankees, and I said, "Oh my goodness, the Scarfo family burials there."
I mean, again, is this a myth? Is this folklore? Is it true? Supposedly, Scarfo had anywhere from $1 to $3 million stashed in his house in Atlantic City, and when Leonetti flipped, his mother, Nancy, was Scarfo's sister, was able to get into the house and get the money before they disappeared into WITSEC, the Witness Security Program. That's all
Now,
the story.
but I'm just curious though, especially since this is during the time when he was like, by the time you're starting writing Philadelphia Inquirer, I think he had like his first.
Thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe to our channel and check out more content. Feel free to give us your feedback and suggestions on who we should do next in the comments. This is Infinitely Productions. We love ya.